Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're in our first cycle still of 1993, and really been looking forward to doing this episode for a long time. Of course, we're talking about Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. Um, Bought this movie digitally on Amazon like sometime last year, like several months ago. Maybe even like more than that. Maybe like at like 6 months ago. I don't remember when I purchased it. I can look through probably look through my Amazon like purchase list or order list and see. But bought it, and I knew I was going to be doing this series, and I didn't want to watch it kind of and spoil myself from then watching it again and doing this episode. So I kind of like waited on it, kind of like just let it sit because I wanted to go into it totally fresh and watched it just earlier today and had an amazing time with it. It's an awesome movie. I got some notes here about it, but just some quick context. I remember when this came out in 1993. It just looked awesome. I remember seeing trailers for it. MTV did like a whole like special event for it, and it was really cool looking. And my friend and I were really excited to see it. My friend was going to be able to see it. I think like his mom was going to take him or something, and they invited me to go to it as well. But I had to get my parents' permission to do it. They're like, like we'll take you, but you just check with your parents to make sure that it's cool with them. And the reason that this is kind of a big deal is like I've had seen like R-rated movies like before this, like on TV or HBO. That's it. Guess that's TV, or like renting them on VHS or whatever. But Demolition Man was the first R-rated movie that I was allowed to see in theaters, and so that kind of definitely has like just a huge kind of nostalgia factor for me. Is this being the first R-rated movie that my parents like gave me permission to actually go with my friend to see. But got some notes here about this movie. Been really excited about getting into this one. So let me get the notes up here. So Demolition Man, first released October 8th, 1993. Again, first R-rated movie. This was the also first time I had seen probably in film form, at least Sandra Bullock, and I think Bill Cobbs. Bill Cobbs has a kind of more minor role, but I've seen him in a lot of stuff since, and he's a great character actor. But this was the first movie that I had seen, at least like chronologically, with Sandra Bullock. I think a couple years later I saw like Love Potion #9 on like TV or something. But big fan of Sandra Bullock, and this is the first time I saw her in any film. Some quick notes about this is the writer Peter Lenkov. Apparently, like right out of college, didn't really have any connections. Wrote some scripts. Wrote this based on kind of like was inspired by Lethal Weapon, and then also was kind of inspired by like reading stuff about like celebrities potentially being like cryogenically frozen. So being cryogenically frozen is a huge kind of plot point or like device in this movie because both Stallone's character and Wesley Snipes' character, John Spartan and Simon Phoenix respectively, get frozen in like the somewhat late 90s and then get defrosted in 2032. Apparently, the kind of like production design was based on there's a thing in LA called City Walk, and it's kind of this like it looks somewhat futuristic, or I guess futuristic back in the 90s. And they were like the writers were kind of figuring what would LA look like if it all looked like this. So a lot of the production design of almost said Los Angeles, San Angeles, because in the movie the kind of whole area is Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara are kind of merged into basically one basic gigantic city essentially. So they kind of got inspiration from City Walk, and a lot of the buildings that are in like that are shown are like one is like the LA Convention Center. I think Lanita Huxley's Sandra Bullock's character, her apartment is like the like Pacific Design. It's like or it's like somewhere in Hollywood, but it looks futuristic enough in the 90s that it would pass for a building, like 40 years into the future, that kind of thing. So got inspired by that. What else we have here? Apparently, so one major thing about the movie is Taco Bell is kind of every restaurant is Taco Bell because they won the franchise wars. Apparently, they had asked Burger King to potentially do it. And they ended up, I think, like either backing out or not being interested. McDonald's had no interest in doing it, but Taco Bell did. And a funny thing is, like, I ended up learning recently that in some of the other international versions of the movie, it's actually Pizza Hut and not Taco Bell. So, like, Taco Bell in the American version, and I think maybe in some of the other, like, European versions, it might be Pizza Hut. I think the North American one was Taco Bell. But every restaurant is Taco Bell. A really kind of funny, kind of like little plot point. Because I remember going to Taco Bell like before this movie came out, or like when it was coming out, and I don't know if I still have it anymore. But they had these kind of mini, maybe like half the size of regular film posters, posters for Demolition Man, and I got one of them. I don't know if I still have it. If I do have it still, it's like in a like storage box somewhere. But it was like a really cool poster. It's basically the poster you see over to the side here, but a smaller, like kind of mini poster, like maybe like bigger than the posters you would get at like an AMC if you went to like a theater, but like maybe about like 20 by 20 or something like that. Don't remember the exact size. And what else do we have here? Apparently, also one major thing, a recurring joke, is the three seashells, which are used for in restrooms. They never actually explain how they're used, but I think there was like one of the writers had noticed a decorative bag of seashells in like a bathroom, and kind of just used that as kind of inspiration for the whole three seashell bathroom like tools or whatever they are. Like again, they never explained them, and the last line in the movie is actually John Spartan asking Lydia Huxley how the shells work. What else we got here? So in the version that I watched, in basically the main movie, there is a little prologue set in 1996 in Los Angeles, and it's basically how John Spartan kind of arrests Simon Phoenix, and basically Simon Phoenix then basically frames John Spartan for murder of like 30 people. That whole 1996 sequence was not in the original script. It was basically supposed to start when they got defrosted initially. But then I think the prologue is good because it gives you backstory to kind of both their characters, as well as showing you that they are, when they get defrosted, they are basically men out of time, essentially, where they're like not accustomed to kind of like the society that is present in 2032. So I think that little prologue is an important element to the movie. Apparently, both also Stallone and Wesley Snipes initially passed on the role. They eventually, of course, obviously came back around to it, and I'm glad they did, because I think this is one of my favorite Stallone movies, and it might be my favorite Wesley Snipes performance. Simon Phoenix is just an incredibly, like, he's like the villain, but then he becomes like a sub-villain based on Nigel Hawthorne's character, and he's got some of the best lines in the movie. You can definitely tell Wesley Snipes was having a blast when he was making this movie. He's definitely got some of the best like dialogue. And I was kind of worried that the version I was watching, and toward the end of the movie, they are defrosting a bunch of the kind of more violent criminals. So they can basically, Simon Phoenix is trying to get a bunch of like more like minions essentially. And he's going through a list. He's like, Jeffrey Dahmer, I love this guy. It's one of the kind of like funnier lines of the movie. And apparently after Dahmer's death, I think like a year or two later, they edited that line out of the movies, and I had heard about that, and I was concerned that this version that I purchased on Amazon was going to have that line edited out or changed or whatever, but it was the actual Jeffrey Dahmer line, so it was the original like theatrical version, which is good. Lori Petty was initially also signed to play the role of Lena Huxley, and apparently only was on did like 2 days of filming, and then basically I think was let go over I think in my research it was like creative differences or whatever it was. But there was the car used in the movie was actually a concept car from like a year or two before, called the GM Ultralight, and that's basically the San Angeles Police Department car is kind of based on that. But you have cameos from Dan Cortez, if you remember him from MTV, like MTV Sports. He also did the kind of special Demolition Man special, basically leading up to the premiere of this movie. He's in it. He is the singer in the Taco Bell singing. He's like, in the valley of the Jolly Green Giant. That's Dan Cortez from MTV. Doing like MTV Sports and all that. Dennis Leary is also in the movie as Edgar Friendly, and he gets to do his kind of patented Dennis Leary kind of like rambling scene. It's really good. The movie ended up in 1993 grossing about $160 million, so that was pretty good. And now we're going to just basically run down the plot points of this movie. So again, this is one of my favorite films. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I always have a really good time watching it. But starts out in 1996. John Spartan, I think basically probably against police orders, goes in to arrest Simon Phoenix. And it's basically like urban warfare and like basically like there's a bus of passengers, like a municipal bus has been like kidnapped with up to 30 people on board. Spartan basically they fly a helicopter and he bungee jumps in, takes out a bunch of guards. Simon Phoenix takes this really cool looking knife and just stabs a bunch of gas cans, and there's a standoff between the two of them, and he's like, "Where are the hostages?" And then like Stallone pulls his gun out and like Wesley Snipes is like, he's like, "Hey, you're up to your feet in gasoline and gonna like light this place on fire," which he actually does. There's also C4 in there, so it explodes. But he basically arrests Simon Phoenix, and then they find the passengers, and basically Stallone gets framed for the murder of all these bus passengers. Now, watching this movie, like more, like I don't want to say logically, but like you would think they would be able to do some kind of like forensics on the bodies to determine that they had, like they were already dead before John Spartan even arrived. Because even later in the movie, Simon Phoenix is like, "Oh yeah, those passengers, they were already dead. They were cold as Haagen-Dazs by the time you got there." But you would think there would be some kind of police forensics that could be like, okay, like John Spartan got there at like 1 in the morning. These bodies have been dead for like 3 hours or whatever. But anyhow, that's kind of the plot point or plot device that gets both Stallone and Wesley Snipes frozen. So Wesley Snipes is probably already in prison at this point, or like they probably put him in first. They put Stallone in. They basically freeze him, and then it flashes forward like 39 years, I think, 1993 to 2023, 93, let's see, 2003, 13, 23, 33, yeah, 39 years. It's basically a utopia or a dystopian utopia because the whole thing with Dennis Leary's character is they basically don't conform to how Nigel Hawthorne's character, who is Dr. Cocteau, who basically created the entire kind of society, doesn't basically they don't agree with that, like with what this utopia is supposed to be. After that, so basically we have the cryo prison. Sandra Bullock's character is driving around. The cars can self-drive, which is cool, but there's like a fiber optic like link between her and the warden. It's essentially FaceTime if you like obviously featured like being kind of like that now. But they eventually get to Simon Phoenix's parole hearing, and he knows the password. He's kind of this mumbling in Spanish, like basically like translating what the warden is saying. And then the warden's like, "Do you have anything fresh to say on your behalf?" And Simon Phoenix is like, "Yeah, I do." And it's like teddy bear, and the handcuffs pop off. And then he's like obviously got like martial arts training. He kills a couple guards, and in one of the cooler, kind of like more gross scenes of the movie, you see him basically rips the warden's eye out with a pen and uses the retinal scanner that way. Basically holds the pen up to the scanner and just like. Whoop. So Simon Phoenix gets out. There's a code 187, which apparently, like the San Angeles Police Department hasn't had one of those codes in like 20 or something years. So there's been no like murder, death, kills like in that time. Simon Phoenix gets loose and starts basically just doing like accessing a computer. He's like, ah, damn, I'm possessed. I wish I didn't know I could play the accordion too or something like that. He's like, because he's typing in. And this is probably all part of his like behavioral like engineering or whatever you want to call it that comes up later. But he easily dispatches like the squad of officers that come get him, and he is basically trying to figure out where a gun is located, where to get weapons. And they, when they pull up the kind of parole hearing, Sandra Bullock pulls up the parole hearings, and Bill Cobb's character, who is also in the prequel as like a different actor, looks and he's like, "Oh, it's Simon Phoenix. Like he's like one of the most evil people ever." And like so, and then they decide to kind of thinking of the actor. I forget the actor's name, but he plays the like basically the chief of police. He's in the Shawshank Redemption. Great actor. And he's kind of against the idea of defrosting John Spartan. Because basically, they're like, well, we need this is a 20th century criminal. We need a 20th century cop to go after it. So they kind of reluctantly defrost Sylvester Stallone's character, and now he's basically a fish out of water. You have the whole verbal morality statute thing, where if you cuss, you get a ticket. Sandra Bullock's character, like to speak on her for a moment, is awesome because her whole office is like 20th century stuff. There's like a Lethal Weapon 3 poster in there and a bunch of other kind of 20th century toys and like memorabilia. So she's to kind of like it. She kind of reminds me of like obviously this came later. Kind of reminds me of the way Tom Paris would behave on Voyager, where he was like kind of obsessed with the 20th century. Sandra Bullock's character is very similar in that way. But they defrost Stallone. Obviously, his method of police work is vastly different than the way the 2032 police are working. They Stallone's like, Simon Phoenix is going for a gun. That's all he wants is weapons. And they're like, well, the only place weapons are even stored in the city is in a museum. This brings me up to a really weird kind of thing I was thinking about, like logically as well. So Wesley Snipes goes to the museum, and one line that I still use to this day is like he's trying to break into the weapon case, and the guy's like, "Pardon me, sir, but what's your boggle?" It's like, "What's your boggle?" Just a great line. But he throws the dude through the case, gets all the weapons. You would think if they were storing weapons in a museum that they would not just have ammunition in them or near them, so they wouldn't be able to be used. But that's kind of like a minor, like little like plot issue there. But Stallone shows up there. They fight. They have like a pretty cool like shootout in the museum. There's like I forget the model of the gun, but the laser gun in the movie is actually based on I think it's some Heckler and Koch, and I forget exactly what it is, but it's like a caseless. It fires bullets, but in the movie, they basically just use it as a prop, and it's like basically like a laser gun, basically. It takes a while to charge up, but it fires like pretty powerful shots. Simon Phoenix escapes and then meets up with Cocteau and Glenn Shadix's character, obviously from Beetlejuice. He plays Associate Bob, and he's about to shoot Cocteau, and Cocteau's like, "No, I don't think you will." He's like, "Don't you have a job to do?" So, basically, the whole thing is that Cocteau has basically programmed Simon Phoenix to be basically even more violent and crazy than he was initially with his like behavioral engineering. Because when they go through the list of programming later in the movie, it's like, oh, he knows urban warfare, firearms, like torture techniques, like enhanced like speed, all this other kind of stuff. Stallone's character basically learns how to knit. But he was Simon Phoenix was brought out of cryo freeze to basically get rid of Edgar Friendly, who is kind of a thorn in Cocteau's side because he's like probably like the last, not the last person, but like his people are kind of like in his way of like this perfect utopia, if you will. So again, it's basically a dystopian utopia kind of thing. Haven't read the book, but Sandra Bullock's character, like Huxley, is based on Aldous, the character from, or at least named after the character from Brave New World. But never read the book, but I heard it's supposed to be really good. So I remember like people in high school like reading that, but I think that was like the advanced English class or something. But they escape. They start doing more police work. They get invited to Taco Bell. This is where you see the Dan Cortez doing the whole Valley of the Jolly Green Giants thing. Dennis Leary's crew, Edgar Friendly, they arrive at Taco Bell and basically like steal all the food because they're basically like living in the sewers essentially, or old, like I think it may even just be like old Los Angeles. They don't really explain it, but it looks like basically the new San Angeles was just built on top of the old one, and the old one is kind of like in these. The way you get to them is basically through like sewer manholes essentially. But they rob the place. They bring everybody's basically like talking smack on Stallone, like thinking that he's like terrible and all this kind of stuff. And it may be part of it. But after that, basically, there's also talk of the Schwarzenegger Presidential Library, where so there's just these in jokes between all the actors. So like, there's the Schwarzenegger Presidential Library. There's like the whole thing where there's a radio station that plays commercials. Like just small touches like that make this movie. It makes the world feel really interesting. because you just have like stuff that we would look at today and be like, oh, a station that plays nothing but commercials. That sounds weird, but that's like what their oldie station is. A lot of stuff is also like straight up just like illegal. They're like, hey, if it's bad for you, it's illegal. So smoking is illegal, like all this other stuff. But they go back to Sandra Bullock's apartment. They do this weird like sex thing where like you put these helmets on and it's like it's supposed to be like mental like stimulation. And Sandra Bullock kicks Stallone out of the apartment, or yeah, the apartment, and he's got his own apartment there too. He sees the security footage of Simon Phoenix and Cocteau from the museum, and then you see him start like knitting and doing all this weird stuff. He gives Sandra Bullock a sweater like the next scene. But then that's when they determined that basically like this like the stuff that Simon Phoenix has been like rehabilitated with, like these skills are not something you would normally do. So they figured they're like, hey, like if you think you can control this guy, you can't. Because like Stallone goes into like Cocteau's office and basically like tells him like what's going on. They're like, well, we're gonna put you back in cryo freeze. And then Sandra Bullock's character is like, well, like now I'm direct, like disobeying a direct order. They essentially go to the sewers below. The other great thing is Simon Phoenix gets a gang later in the movie. He's like, hey, I need this list of people defrosted. One of those people is Jesse Ventura. So Jesse Ventura from obviously WWF, but also like former like Minnesota governor, and then also he's a Predator. He's awesome at that. But he's got like a whole gang of people. They're all kind of wearing like the Mad Max style, like biker kind of like gear, like tires as armor, stuff like that. So that whole aesthetic's a thing. But they go down below. They basically tell Dennis Leary's character what's going on. Simon Phoenix attempts to kill him. They obviously fail that. There is a huge car chase with, I think it's an old, the reason it says I remember the car now is an Oldsmobile 442. Really cool car chase through, like, I think the LA tunnel's in there, that's downtown. But car chase that ends up going into the kind of like crashing it. And one of my favorite lines is like when like Stallone gets into the police car, he's like, break. He's like, break now, you Mickey Mouse piece of shit. And then crashes it, and then the foam like basically saves him. But then him and Sandra Bullock go into the cryo prison to basically stop Wesley Snipes. Sandra Bullock's character ends up killing somebody. Like it's obviously like him or us, because she's probably never like even being as a police officer like was definitely the whole thing is basically like there's a line from Rob Schneider where he's like, we're police officers, we're not trained to handle this. But they go in, Sandra Bullock beats some guys down, and he's like, hey, where do you learn to kick like that? She's like, Jackie Chan movies. But then we get into the whole fight in the actual cryo prison. That's where you have the whole Jeffrey Dahmer line. But you have a final kind of showdown between John Spartan and Simon Phoenix. It's a pretty cool like shootout. There's some good stuff going on there. And then there's a part where like Simon Phoenix is like dancing with the guy. He's like da 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 da. You can, like I said, you can just tell that Wesley Snipes was having a blast doing this. And then you see the freezing like tube thing, and then the whole end of the movie is basically Stallone smashes it. Wesley Snipes gets frozen again, and then he gets his head kicked off. Because there's a line early in the movie where he's like, "I lose my head if it wasn't attached." There was like a little bit of foreshadowing. One of the cool lines is like Stallone is it cold in here, or is it just me? Because that's what Wesley Snipes says to him in the opening kind of like confrontation in the 1996 portion of the movie. And then after that, basically, cryo prison gets destroyed, and then basically Benjamin Bratt is in this as well. He shows back up, and he's kind of been taken in by the people that like live like in the underground city area. And they're like, well, what are we gonna do? Our whole way of life is now like weird. And the guy and Stallone's like, you guys will figure it out. It's fine. But that's basically the plot of this movie. It's just such an awesome movie. I was really happy to be able to get to do it for this series. And I've been waiting a while to watch the movie. Like I said earlier, I didn't want to watch the movie like when I purchased it on Amazon last year and then watch it again for this. I definitely wanted to go in to this video seeing it seeing it fresh. So I had a lot of fun in this movie, and I think that's going to do it for this video. But definitely, if you haven't seen Demolition Man, check it out. Even if you see it, it's definitely worth a rewatch. But that's going to do it for this video. We'll be back again in a few days. Probably be doing another video game, and then we'll be moving into, after that episode, we'll be moving into 1994 for our first cycle of that year. But that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Take care. Have a good one. Thank you.